Let's hop into the starts of the week for week 14. Before we get started, hit the thumbs up, click the bell to subscribe to the channel, and make sure you can leave all of your questions for week 14 start sit stuff. Leave it in the comments below. Let's get started.
Perfect.
All right, well, we have 6 teams on bye this week, and well, that means you're going to see a lot of names that maybe you wouldn't always be comfortable starting, but this week it'll be okay. So I'm going to go position by position, give you some of my favorite starts that probably aren't the most obvious of fantasy studs. So let's begin with the quarterback position, and at the quarterback spot, I'm looking at Kirk Cousins for the Minnesota Vikings going up against the Detroit Lions, and you're going to hear me talk about this game a lot, okay? The Lions are giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and well, Cousins hasn't been great as of lately, but he's had 4 straight tough matchups, 3 of which have been against teams that are in the top 8 against quarterbacks in terms of fantasy production. Last time that Kirk Cousins went up against the Lions, he was able to put up 260 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the quarterback 10 on the week. So while I know he hasn't been great as of lately, he should be solid this week going up against the Lions. The next quarterback I'm taking a look at here is, well, in the exact same game, it is Jared Goff going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Goff has actually been quite good lately. He was the quarterback 4 last week. He's had back-to-back games with 2 passing touchdowns and at least 21 fantasy points. Now, Minnesota, they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, and Detroit's just getting healthy at the right time now. Not that it's going to necessarily change their season a whole lot, but Jared Goff, he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown back, DeAndre Swift, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds, and now Jameson Williams all active. So Goff should be able to put up top 12 quarterback numbers. So if you're looking for a quarterback to stream this week, Jared Goff gives you a pretty good option. All right, moving on to the running back position, and I'm talking about DeAndre Swift going up against the Minnesota Vikings. I promise you, I'm definitely talking about more players than just this Minnesota and Detroit game, but listen, it's just all the stars are aligning in this one, especially for DeAndre Swift. Now, the Vikings have the 5th most targets and receptions to the running back position. An odd thing to think of, but yeah, the running back position, being able to catch the ball, it just adds that much more value, especially in those PPR and half PPR formats. And well, DeAndre Swift actually had a pretty good week last week, and he goes into this event here against the Minnesota Vikings with the 2nd highest point total on the week at 51.5 points. Swift coming off back-to-back games of at least 6 or more targets. And last week, he had his highest number of rush attempts since week 1. Now, DeAndre Swift can likely, especially with what we've seen the Minnesota Vikings give up in the past, he can likely be penciled in for about 5 or more receptions this week in this game. And if he falls into the end zone, you're talking about a guy that could be even a top 12 running back here in week 14 and get you into the fantasy football playoffs. All right, another running back I want to talk about here is Foreman of the Carolina Panthers going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Over the last 3 games, no team has had a higher running play percentage than the Carolina Panthers. That's right. They are pounding the rock, and they're using Foreman to do it. Now they go up against an opponent in the Seattle Seahawks who, over the last 4 weeks, have allowed an average of 168 rushing yards per game. So this is the perfect matchup for Foreman to just absolutely go off. Not to mention, over the last 3 weeks, Seattle has allowed 5 rushing touchdowns, including a 2-touchdown performance to Cam Akers in week 13. Now, this 3rd and final running back I want to talk about is all going to be dependent on what happens with the game time decisions in Seattle. Okay, I'm talking about Travis Homer, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. This is on the other side of that matchup. Now, Travis Homer's going up against the Carolina Panthers. When you look at Seattle and their injury report right now, likely no Ken Walker or DJ Dallas. DJ Dallas is actually looking at as a guy that's definitely not playing. Ken Walker apparently is still 50-50, so we'll find out how that goes on game day. But Travis Homer, he's a passing down back, and he's actually been pretty solid as a runner this year. Over the last 3 games, Seattle's been passing at the 5th highest rate. So that means Travis Homer, especially in those PPR and half PPR leagues, is going to have some value. The only other running back that they're maybe even looking at starting over in Seattle is Tony Jones Jr., who really hasn't shown a whole lot of anything. At least Travis Homer has that receiving role that you look for, especially if you're in dire need of someone who could be an RB3 or a flex for you this week with so many teams on bye. He should be a solid start in a PPR format. The Panthers are allowing the 9th most fantasy points to running backs. So yes, this could be a really good spot for Travis Homer. All right, at the wide receiver position, I'm taking a look at Jerry Jeudy this week going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And Listen, I know what you're thinking, right? The Broncos have just not been good, but the Kansas City Chiefs can at least score points, and that should mean something for Jerry Jeudy and the passing attack for the Denver Broncos. At least we hope, right? The Denver Broncos are going to be without Courtland Sutton. That leaves Jeudy as the top receiving option, who Greg Dulcich, by the way, at the tight end spot, also a pretty good start this week. Now, the Chiefs are giving up the 4th most points to opposing wide receivers in terms of fantasy points, and while the Broncos are 9.5-point underdogs, that means they should be passing a lot. And honestly, at this point, the Broncos just don't have a whole lot going for them, except maybe Jerry Jeudy and Greg Dulcich. So I think both of those guys should be pretty good this week, given the bye weeks and everything going on in this just awful week 14. Jerry Jeudy should be a top 24 wide receiver this week. All right, my next wide receiver I want to take a look at here is DJ Chark going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, I told you, I'm going to be all over this Detroit and Minnesota game. We already know that it should be a high-scoring affair. Chark finished last week as a wide receiver 2 against Jacksonville. He was in the top 24. And now he goes up against Minnesota, who's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. If I like Jared Goff, it means I like his receivers as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark should both have very good games. And who knows, this could be the first time that we really see Jameson Williams start to pop off. DeAndre Swift, this whole game should be filled with fantasy points, full of offense. And DJ Chark remains a guy that should be in that wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 3 range this week. At the tight end spot, I'm looking at Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers going up against the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is the game that's actually set to score even more points than the Detroit-Minnesota game. The Chargers and the Miami Dolphins are the highest point total of the week. We should expect a lot of passing. 2 teams that are number 1 and number 2 in neutral passing rate this season. Now, Miami's allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends, and the Chargers are just so reliant on passing that ball. They actually run the ball the least of any team in the NFL right now. The tight end position has just gotten so bad. You just need to go and find someone that can give you a secure role in a good offense. And that's exactly what Gerald Everett does, okay? He gives you a good role in a high-volume passing offense. I wouldn't think twice about it. If you got Gerald Everett on your team, start him this week against the Miami Dolphins. All right, the last guy I want to talk about here is Chig Okonkwo, the rookie tight end for the Tennessee Titans. And lots of buzz around Chig this week. He is a serious athlete, okay? He had the fastest 40 time amongst all the rookie tight ends at the NFL Combine, running a 4.52, and the dude's averaging over 18 yards per catch. The athleticism pops every time he is out there on the field, and this is a guy that offensive coordinator for the Titans, Todd Downing, has talked about wanting to get him involved more, getting him on the field more, and getting him more targets. He's had back-to-back games with 5 targets, so I'm hoping that number can go up this week. With no Treylon Burks out against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Jags giving up the 11th most points to fantasy tight ends, man, I think it's possible that we could see a top 12 week from Chig Okonkwo, who could have himself a nice breakout. Good luck, everybody, in week 14. Get that W, and I hope to see you all in the playoffs.